Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Ebel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join me on the yoga mat today as we talk about what a carrying angle is and how this affects so many poses that you do in almost every single class, especially things like tabletop, plank, and downward facing dog. Basically, the carrying angle in your arm is the way that your elbow sort of kicks out from the upper arm bone. So to look at this in yourself, you don't want your arms right by your side because your ribs will make the arms poke out, but instead bring your arms in front of your body and try to line up the upper arm bones parallel. So from your shoulder to your elbow should look pretty parallel, and then you'll see that the rest of your arm sort of kicks out. Additionally, you'll see that your wrist doesn't line up perfectly straight from the elbow, but the wrist probably kicks out too. Your carrying angle may be different in each elbow because most of us don't have totally symmetrical bodies. And this is the big problem with carrying angle and yoga poses, because so many yoga poses want us to be perfectly symmetrical on both sides of the body, or the yoga pose is like expected that we can all do every pose in the same way, despite the fact that we all have completely different skeletal structures that work differently, like for each of us. I have never met anyone with a stick straight arm, but they might exist, I don't know. So here is my goniometer. It might be kind of hard to see because it's clear, but basically this device can measure the range of motion in your joint. So let's take a look at my elbow. If I line the top part of the goniometer up straight along my humerus, my upper arm bone, you can see the way it angles out at my elbow. And my elbow angles out about 15 degrees, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. The exact measurement of your carrying angle isn't super important, so don't feel like you have to go find a goniometer and figure that out. But it's more, I just want you to figure out if you do have one, and then I just want to show you how this is going to affect those poses I mentioned, so you won't be feeling bad. If something feels weird in downward dog, you might be like, hey, maybe it's that carrying angle thing E was talking about. So in poses like tabletop, plank, and downward dog, you're often told to stack your wrist under your elbow under your shoulder. Unless you have that super stick straight magical arm with no carrying angle, this might feel a little bit weird. As I mentioned a minute ago, the carrying angle in my elbow is about 15 degrees. So there's no way that my wrist is going to line up under my shoulder without me rotating at my elbow and rotating my wrist. So I can get my wrist to line up under my shoulder, but only if I do that rotation. This isn't going to be a huge problem in tabletop. It's much more of a problem in plank and downward dog when you're putting a lot more body weight into the wrist joint. If I try to keep my wrists stacked right under my shoulders and then step back into a plank, it is so uncomfortable. Now that I am aware of the correct way to position my body for plank, I cannot do it like that anymore for more than a couple seconds. It starts to pinch my elbow and feel like a lot of pressure in my wrists. And I understand now that it's because I am rotating in my elbow joint, I am rotating in my wrist joint, and then I'm putting a bunch of body weight onto those joints. And that's a lot of pressure that probably isn't going to end up good. And speaking from my own yoga injuries, so you might be thinking, what's the big deal if I have to do that little bit of rotation, but then my arm lines up, whatever. Like I was saying, tabletop, it might not really matter, but then plank and especially downward dog, when you've got your body weight going into the joints, that's when it could cause injury. Let's do a quick experiment. If your arms were just down by your side and I asked you to reach your arms up overhead and act like you were pressing your palms into the ceiling, I'm going to guess that your wrists are not lined up right above your shoulders. I can see in mine that they are definitely wider. Let's do that again, but this time attempt to keep your hands in line with your shoulders, keeping the arms perfectly straight. And now I'm feeling it in my shoulder joint. I mentioned when I tried to stack the wrist under shoulders in tabletop, I could feel it in my elbow and my wrist. But when we go into downward dog like we just did with just the arms, now I can feel it pinching in my shoulder joint as well in downward dog. So let's think about this. When you bring your arms up naturally, they go wider than your shoulders. But if you're being told that they need to stack, you're pinching them in. So you can see arm bone is in line, it's inside my shoulder joint. When I pull my arm like this, it actually slightly moves that bone so it's not secure within the shoulder joint, but actually the humerus, the upper arm bone, starts to move away from the shoulder joint a little bit. Sorry, not trying to get too technical here, but do you understand that? Here's the natural position. Here's where the yoga pose is telling you to go. Before I had this information, I injured my shoulder doing yoga. And I really wonder now if it's because I was trying to put my arm out of its natural alignment into the correct alignment for the yoga pose. Let's just be clear that there is no correct alignment for any pose that's going to fit everybody. You will have your own natural alignment based on the different angles in your joints. That's why the cue of wrists under shoulders drives me insane now. And you might be able to stack wrists under shoulders and never get an injury in tabletop or plank or downward dog. But what about now when you try to kick up to a handstand? If I'm going to kick up into a handstand, but rather than allowing my arms to be in the correct alignment for my body, which is going to be wider than my shoulders, if I try to bring my arms in and do wrists under shoulders, and then that makes that arm bone pop out just a little bit from my arm socket, but now I'm going to kick my feet up over my head and put all my body weight into my shoulders, elbows, and wrists essentially. Can you see where that would cause an injury? So to look at your own carrying angle is actually really simple. You don't need a goniometer. You don't need to have this number memorized and be worried about it in poses. It's more that you just need to trust yourself to listen to where your own body wants to go for your comfort. So if I was to ask you to go into tabletop without putting the wrist under the shoulders, where would your hands go? For most of us, hands are wider than the shoulders, and for most of us, the wrist actually angle out a little bit. So you'll hear yoga teachers say like middle finger or pointer finger forward, but actually, like I talked about at the very beginning of this video, the wrist has a little angle too. So does this carrying angle make sense, and why we can't line our arms up in a perfectly straight line, and why if we try to, we might cause an injury? If you have any questions or comments about this, please leave them below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll have many more videos coming into this You Can Do Yoga series because I want to show everyone that you can do yoga. You just maybe can't do some of the crazy pretzel poses they're asking you to, or maybe your skeleton just doesn't move in the way that they want you to, like wrist under shoulders. So if there's any yoga poses that you can't do that you're wondering if maybe you can, leave a comment down below and maybe that will be a new video in the series. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today and watching this video. Until next time, don't forget to subscribe. Remember, you can do yoga, and be well. I don't want to say that, it sounds, I'm going to do that one more time, but I've got it. I think I do need my goniometer. This is getting too complicated. I don't even remember what I said a minute ago. Hopefully, I almost had it. Okay, that's good. Now that I do a plank where I learned all about these things like that I'm, why can't you speak? I hated that too. One more time. One final thought about this where simple way to, like I said, as much as we need, like I used to, I have a, it's just not the way that, our, an earwig, where the did you come from? Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. That was so gross. That was so gross, it was an earwig. I like that. You so smarty, Leisha. Boom, chicka boom.